Hello, everyone. Um, Thank you for being very patient and welcome to this class, Psychology 405 online sections 5 and 6 for fall 2020 Mystery, Murder, and Madness. So, first, I am going to go over the syllabus. I'll also introduce myself, I'll tell you a little about myself, and then I will go through syllabus when assignments are due, and then I will show you how to do some of the stuff in Blackboard that requires you to do these assignments. So, my name is Ali Momin. I am a PhD student at George Mason University, and this is actually probably my last semester at George Mason as I finish up my PhD. Sorry. So, in Psychology 405, we're going to learn how to apply psychological principles to areas from the media that are related to mystery, murder, and madness. So, we're going to talk about psychological topics and how they relate to various topics from the media that have captivated people. So, for example, in the beginning of the class, we're going to go over the Serial podcast, and the Serial podcast is a true crime murder about a teenage female who was murdered back in 1996, I think, 1999, and each week I'm gonna teach and cover certain psychological principles like memory, social cognition, social perception, psychopathology, and how they relate to different themes from the podcast. Then a little bit later on, we're going to talk about psychology and in particular personality disorders and how they relate to understanding serial killers like Richard Kuklinski, who is a famous serial killer, and Luca Magnotta. And then towards the end, we're going to talk about Batman, and in particular, we're going to talk about theories of psychopathology related to post-traumatic stress disorder and how they relate to Batman himself as well as other characters in the Batman universe. And then at the end of the semester, you guys will work on your group projects and a group presentation, which I'll talk about more when that time comes. So, getting into the grading scheme, you will notice that a big portion of your grade consists of lecture summaries. So, for each week that I post a lecture, I'll also create a forum on the discussion board for that lecture. And then within the forum, you will create a thread. In the subject line of that thread, you're going to put in your first and last name. And then the message portion, you're going to submit a 1 to 2 paragraph summary of the lecture. And so the purpose of this is to ensure that you're watching my lectures and paying attention to the lectures and like really understanding the psychological principles that I cover. Okay, and then 20% of your grade will also come from journal article summaries. So for each week that I post a journal article, I will also create a forum on the discussion board for that week's journal articles. So just one forum for all the journal articles. And then within the forum for the particular week's journal articles, you'll then create a thread and you'll again enter your first and last name. And then in the message portion, you're going to submit one paragraph for each journal article. And then within those paragraphs, you're going to summarize the journal article and relate it to topics from the podcast. So I mean for the journal articles to line up with the specific episodes that you're listening to that week. But your paragraphs, when relating them to the Serial podcast, can cover any information from any episode from the podcast. Okay. And so, for example, this week there won't be a lecture, but there is a journal article that I've assigned you to read. And because there's a journal article for you to read, there will also be a journal article summary. And this is due by next Sunday at midnight. So, for example, you're going to go to Blackboard, you're going to open up your course, and to get the syllabus, for example, you're going to go to the syllabus tab. To get the journal article, you're going to go to the course content tab, and you'll see here I also have a link to the Serial Season 1 podcast. And to open the journal article, there are many ways to do it. I usually just click on it, and then you can download it from here using this link. And after you read it, I then want you to go to the discussion board, and you'll see that I have a forum here, Loftus 1975. You're going to go within that forum, you will create a thread, and in the subject line you're going to put your name, and then in the message portion you're going to give me a summary of the journal article and how it relates to what you've been listening to in episodes 1 through 4 of the podcast. So for this portion, for this journal article, really just want you to focus on episodes 1 and 2 of the podcast. And so I really just want one paragraph per journal article. So for example, this week you only have one journal article assigned, and so you're going to write one paragraph, and then within that paragraph you're going to summarize the journal article and relate it to what you've been listening to in the podcast, and then submit. So blah blah, don't write blah blah. Okay, and then I will be able to read your thread. Okay. So most weeks I will also create, moving on, most weeks I'll also create a forum on the discussion board where we discuss as a class topics related to that week's materials. The way this will work is I will create the forum, but then you will create threads within those forums. And these threads are meant to spark discussions on how particular psychological principles we've been learning about that week relate to topics from the podcast. So I don't want you to just discuss about whether you think Adnan is guilty or not, or stuff related to gossip in the podcast. I really want you to think about this in terms of psychology. Okay? And so in order to engage in a discussion within a current thread, within that thread you're going to reply to other people's posts. Okay? And so each student is required to post as much as you would like, 2 threads a semester, and contribute at least 3 replies a week. And forums for a specific week will only be open for that week. So, for example, you'll notice that if you go back to the discussion board, that there is no discussion board forum for this week, so I'm going to create one. Okay, so this is oh, look at that. I don't make you do a discussion board classroom discussion during the first week. We start on 9/17. So for example, on September 17th I'll create a forum. September 7th actually. Classroom discussion. Based on what we covered this week. I'll submit. let me make this more specific. Classroom discussion. And then you guys will go within a forum and you'll create threads. So, for example, I might be a student in this class and we learned about memory during this week, and there are a lot of examples from the podcast that have to do with people remembering and forgetting certain details. So you might think, wow, like I really want to discuss more about why Jay, who is one of the characters from the podcast, kept on changing his story when he was talking to the police. Perhaps this had something to do with how memory works in the brain. So, right, our J's are inconsistencies in Jay's testimony, memory errors. Yeah. Or is Jay a liar? And then you might elaborate in the message section. Okay, submit. And then another student will come and say, hey, like, this is an interesting thread I want to talk about. So I'm going to reply to Allie. I might, and in your response, I want you to talk about it in a psychological way. I don't want you to be like, you are an idiot for saying this. No, I don't want you to write that. I want you to write something along the lines of, based on what we learned about memory, I think that there were a lot of factors that happened during Jay's life at the time that could have accounted for him giving inconsistent testimony to the police. And I don't think he was lying. Or you could say, no, like, I don't think Jay had any, there were any reasons why Jay's memory would be corrupted, and I think that he was lying, and this is why I think that. Okay. Or you might come here and say, I'm not really interested in this thread. I'm going to create another thread. Oops, sorry. And it can be on anything you want. Okay. I'll also, during the first couple weeks, create threads to help moderate the group discussions and help kind of like spark ideas. Okay. So, there will be a lot of lectures. There will be a lot of journal articles to read, and there will be a lot of classroom discussions. But we won't have all of those. We won't have lecture summaries, journal articles. We won't have lectures, journal articles, or discussion board classroom discussions every week. So you have to look at the syllabus to see when those time come. So, for example, this week, you're going to watch this lecture that I'm recording right now, and you're going to listen to episodes 1 through 4 of the podcast, and you're going to read the Loftus article, and then you're going to do a journal article summary, and that's due by 9, 6, and midnight, so that's Sunday. And then next week, I'm going to give a lecture on serial and the constructive nature of memory. So for that week, there will be a lecture summary, and there will also be discussion board classroom discussions, and that'll be due by 9:13 by midnight, so Sunday by midnight. If you go a couple minutes over, that's fine too. Let's fix an error here. You'll notice that September 14th, we have a lecture. You have to listen to podcasts, and you have journal articles to read. And so you will have a lecture summary due, a journal article summary, and discussion board classroom discussions. And those will be due by midnight, 9:20, so that's Sunday at midnight. And as the weeks go along, we will keep in touch, and you will continue putting your summaries into Blackboard. And don't think too hard about how long the summary has to be or what goes into it. During the first few weeks, I will reach out to specific students if I think that you are not putting enough effort into your into the lecture summaries or the journal article summaries or the discussion board classroom discussions. Okay, and then if I'm not reaching out to you, then you're doing totally fine, and there's nothing for you to change. What else? Certain weeks I'll have you watch certain episodes of true crime shows or about serial killers, and a lot of these are either on Netflix or YouTube, and I'll provide links for you, or I'll provide access for you guys to get to this material if you don't have Netflix, or I think one of these are on HBO. So when that time comes, I'll help you guys out. Moving along, let's see here. So you'll see that beginning in October, in the middle of October, we'll start talking about serial killers and how they relate to personality disorders. We're going to do I'm going to do a lecture of Richard Kuklinski and do an analysis based on personality disorders. Later on in October, we're going to do I will do another lecture on serial killers, except this time I'll talk about Luca Magnotta from the Netflix series Don't Fuck with Cats. The week of 10/26, there will be no lectures or nothing for you guys to do. I'll be attending a conference virtually because of COVID-19, and I will be just focusing on that conference the entire week. And then this is an interesting week. So during this week, there will be a lecture, and we're going to talk about what constitutes a sociopath, because this is an interesting question in the Serial podcast. Is Adnan, the person who was convicted of the murder of Hae-Min Lee in the Serial podcast, who some people think might be guilty, is he just a regular kid who was wrongly convicted, or is he actually a sociopath who is able to give off an aura that he is not capable of committing murder? And so there will be a journal article summary, but and a lecture, but I won't make you do a lecture summary. I want you to focus on discussion board classroom discussions. In particular, I want you guys to debate on whether you think Adnan, the presumed killer in the Serial podcast, if he's innocent and people have the wrong idea of him, or if you think no, like he has the traits that make up a murderer, he's a psychopath. And then in the next week, I'm going to give a lecture on Batman and psychopathology. You will watch the movie Batman Begins. I will post a lecture, so there will be a lecture summary, and there will also be discussion board classroom discussions. The following week, I'm going to do a lecture on the group projects, the final group projects, and then we'll create groups. So more information will be provided on that. There will be no class the next week, just focus on Thanksgiving. And then we will do a group project question and answer, so you guys can get your questions answered about the group project. And this will be accomplished via, I just got an email from a student. No problem. And this will be conducted via Zoom, so you guys can get your questions out of the way. And your task here is just to continue working on these group projects. And then the final week will be group presentations via Zoom, and I'll have you guys conduct classroom board discussions based on those group presentations. So here's just some extra information that you can get by reading the syllabus. I won't go over this here. At this point I usually have students ask questions. So what I'll have you do is have you guys email me questions during this week, and then I'll create another lecture answering those questions. So just remember that for this week, you need to watch this video, listen to the first 4 episodes of the Serial podcast, read the Loftus article, do the journal article summary that is due by midnight. And then next week on Monday, I'll post the first lecture. And you guys will have a lecture summary, discussion board, classroom discussions due by 9:13 at midnight. So this covers the first couple weeks. I'll be posting more videos as the week comes, and then a lecture on Sunday. Just remember to email me with any questions you have so I can answer them in my upcoming video. Thanks, guys.